If there is one thing that humans are known for apart from causing mass extinction events, it's also our imagination. Humans have been dreaming about life on other planets since we first looked up into the night sky and saw those twinkling lights among the stars. And while we haven't quite figured out how to get to Mars yet, we already have plans in place for when we eventually do set foot on the red planet. But what about somewhere a little closer to home? The moon might be Earth's loyal companion, never straying out of its orbit, but it has its own unique challenges and opportunities that make it a very different place to live. So let's unpack the science and see what life on the moon could really look like. Let's start with the obvious. The moon doesn't have any atmosphere to speak of. In fact, it only has an exosphere, which is just a thin veil of gases that surround the moon and escape into space. This is because the moon isn't big enough to hold on to an atmosphere like Earth. Gravity is not just what pulls us towards the ground, but also keeps the atmosphere around our planet. If Earth were any less massive, then the atmosphere would just float away into outer space. And since the moon is 81 times smaller than Earth, it can't hold on to its atmosphere. This lack of atmosphere has some serious implications for anyone hoping to live there permanently. There will be no oxygen to breathe, no nitrogen, argon, or carbon dioxide, no greenhouse gases, and no protection from harmful cosmic radiation and solar winds. It means that astronauts living on the moon would need airtight habitats with their own breathable atmosphere and radiation shielding. But that's just the beginning. Without an atmosphere, sound can't travel through it. So if you lived on the moon, you'd literally be able to hear a pin drop from miles away. But there'd be no wind to carry the sound either, so you wouldn't hear it. On the flip side, you could see much more clearly without the interference of light scattering in the atmosphere. Since there's no air, you'd also never get a tan and you wouldn't be able to sweat. So maybe pack some sunscreen and a fan for your lunar home. You're going to need them. It's hard to imagine anything growing on the moon, at least anything that we're familiar with. Plants on Earth rely on photosynthesis, a process where they use energy from the sun to convert water and carbon dioxide into glucose, which is the food they need to survive. Since there's no carbon dioxide on the moon, plants would need to be genetically modified to survive. And even then, the lack of atmosphere would make it tough for them to transport water around their bodies. Without an atmosphere, there'd also be no weather on the moon. Sure, there'd still be day and night, but there'd be no rain, snow, storms, or clouds. So if you want to live on the moon, you'll need to bring all your water with you. But the lack of atmosphere does have its advantages. On Earth, we're used to things dissolving in liquids. That's how we get our drinks and how our body removes waste. But on the moon, thanks to lower gravity and atmospheric pressure, things would behave differently. Without air molecules getting in the way, you'd be able to dissolve stuff much faster. And this effect is called the low-pressure effect. Astronauts on the moon have actually experienced it firsthand. When they took off their gloves, their fingers seemed to swell up because water was dissolving more quickly in their bloodstream. And while this might not seem like much of an advantage, it means that if we set up proper recycling systems, we could reuse almost everything. Even the water that astronauts drink would come from the urine that they produce. No ecosystem or agriculture would exist on the moon, so there'd be nothing to pollute. Waste disposal would be easy too. Just dump it into the nearest crater and you're good to go. The biggest challenge for anyone trying to live on the moon will be the constant bombardment of meteorites. Every year, the Earth gets hit by about 100 million meteorites, mostly small ones. Most of them end up in the ocean and the rest burn up in the atmosphere before they hit the ground. The moon doesn't have an atmosphere to protect it, though, so every meteorite just keeps going until it smashes into the surface. And that's bad news for anyone living there. On Earth, a meteorite that hits the ground can cause a lot of damage, but the impact is spread out over a large area. On the moon, where the surface is much more barren, the impact would cause a lot more damage per person. To put that into perspective, if a 50-meter-wide meteorite hit the moon where a human settlement was, it would wipe out the entire colony. Another downside to living on the moon is that there's no liquid water on the surface. We know that there must be water deep inside the moon, though, because the moon actually emits a sort of radio signal that can only be produced by water ice. The problem is, mining the moon for water could be trickier than you'd think. That's because the ice is probably hidden under hundreds of feet of regolith, which is the dusty material that covers the moon's surface. Regolith is abrasive, sharp, and incredibly difficult to move. But the moon does have one feature that makes harvesting ice a little easier. It has giant cracks crisscrossing its surface. These cracks are actually lava tubes left over from the moon's volcanic past, and they're completely sealed off from the surface, meaning that they've preserved water ice that's never been exposed to the harsh environment of space. The problem is, these lava tubes are unstable and can collapse at any time. Still, life on the moon won't be without its perks. For one, you'll have a front-row seat to some spectacular views. From the surface, you'll be able to see Earthrise every 27 days as the planet rotates around the moon. And you'll also witness 2 moons in the sky, watching as the Earth rotates around its axis. With no atmosphere to block the view, you'll also be able to see every star in the night sky, including the Milky Way stretching across the heavens. Just don't forget to pack your binoculars. And if you're lucky enough to live near one of the poles, you'll also get to see the aurora, a beautiful display of light caused by charged particles from the sun colliding with the thin lunar atmosphere. Another bonus to living on the moon is that it's right next door. Well, at least as far as space travel goes. Traveling to and from the moon only takes about 3 days, making it a much more viable option for permanent settlements than somewhere like Mars. Plus, the moon actually has a couple of resources that Earth doesn't. For one, the moon has tons of helium-3, an isotope of helium that's incredibly rare on Earth. Helium-3 can be used in nuclear fusion reactors, which could potentially provide humanity with a nearly limitless supply of clean energy. The moon also has a bunch of aluminum, iron, titanium, and silicon, all materials that are essential for launching rockets into space. But maybe the biggest perk of living on the moon is that you can walk on the moon. It's not something everyone will be able to do, but if you wanted to, you could build a suit that would let you experience what it's like to be an astronaut again. Walking on the moon would feel like being a superhero with gravity only 1/6 as strong as Earth. You'd be able to leap huge distances and throw a baseball so hard that it would just keep on going. In fact, if you threw a baseball directly upwards, it would eventually go all the way through the thin atmosphere and into space. Of course, life on the moon would still be full of dangers. We don't know exactly how radiation levels on the surface vary, but we do know that astronauts on the International Space Station receive higher doses of radiation than people on Earth. Still, it's not enough to prevent NASA's Artemis program from sending the first woman and the first person of color to the lunar surface by 2025. Whether we're talking about living on the moon or on Mars, settling on another celestial body will require international cooperation. So here at SCI Show Space, we're excited to partner with the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs and a group of amazing space professionals to bring you this video and future videos about what life beyond Earth might look like. So thanks for joining us. If you're hoping to live on the moon, you'll probably need to learn a whole new language. Check out our video, How Language Works, to brush up on the basics of linguistics.